Just before the pandemic officially hit, I found myself very sick. I thought it was the typical winter flu that makes the rounds starting in October each year and going through the winter months. It was late January of 2020. I had the worst headache and nothing would take it away. I found out later that many others had had a similar illness that winter, and many of us came to believe that we'd had COVID-19 before it hit the headlines here in the US. At any rate, it was during that time that I started watching a lot of YouTube channels that focused on religion and spirituality, especially regarding the occult. And it was during this time that, for the first time, I really began to learn about the life of Aleister Crowley. As someone involved since high school in the study of secret societies, religious history, and parapsychology, I knew the name well, but I had never taken any real dive into what Crowley actually did. I knew he was into sex magic, drugs, that he fancied himself some kind of great occult master. I used to talk about Crowley on the ghost tours I hosted here in Chicago, because there's a little tavern in Lincoln Park which some claim was a meeting place for a chapter of some 1920s Crowleyan club. But I didn't know anything specific. It was during that winter of 2020 that I learned a lot about the things that Crowley did, in particular about the one big thing that he did in his infamous house in Scotland, and the other big thing he did right here in the United States. I also learned about a pair of very influential Americans who counted themselves among his followers. And above all, I learned about the connection of all of it to the UFO Enigma. It may be a ridiculous understatement, but Aleister Crowley lived a rather strange life, a life which ended on December 1st, 1947. This was the same year, of course, that the modern-day UFO era began. Crowley was born in 1875 in Leamington, England. The son of great wealth, he inherited a vast fortune while still in his early 20s. With his every care met, at least at first, he spent the majority of his time probing the depths of the occult. In 1898, after leaving Cambridge University, he was initiated into the Order of the Golden Dawn, which included Bram Stoker and W.B. Yeats as members. Crowley soon found himself on the outs with many of his esoteric associates who believed sobriety and self-control were crucial to the practice of arcane rituals. Crowley, however, had a voracious sexual appetite, seeking out sex with women, men, and even animals. He later engaged in sex acts with his infant daughter. He would say that his first mystical experience was during a homosexual encounter, that the act had summoned some kind of deity. This belief led Crowley to what would become an obsessive pursuit of spiritual growth through sex. In just a few short years, Crowley had burned bridge after bridge because he did not care for rules, boundaries, or any institution or person that told him what to do. In particular, Crowley tousled with Yeats. Rumors flew that Crowley was using black magic on the poet, and some said Yeats responded with his own. Crowley was forever embroiled in some kind of conflict. Even among freaks of the forbidden, he just didn't fit in. And so in 1900, Crowley left it all behind and bought a house on the shores of Scotland's Loch Ness. He was just 25 years old. Crowley called the place Boleskine House, and he chose it for a specific purpose. He planned to hunker down in the remote fortress and attempt one of the most ambitious and dangerous rituals known in the occult world, the Abramelin. The ritual will take 6 months and result, at least he hoped, in the summoning of Crowley's holy guardian angel, an occultism that's not a God-given protector, but one's so-called higher self. The ritual includes invoking the 12 kings and dukes of hell, including Satan, Leviathan, and Belial, in order to bind them. Many experts in Crowley's life believe he originally meant well, to bring these demons under his control and force them to do good. But that's not what happened. Before beginning the ritual, Crowley sharpened his skills as an occultist, engaging in all manner of ritual practice. He reportedly summoned a number of angels, demons, and other beings while warming up for the big one. In fact, some believe even the Loch Ness Monster was conjured up by Crowley during this time in the house. After much preparation, Crowley began the Abremelin. But after months of rituals, during which he claimed to see, according to plan, demonic beings assembling at Beluskin, Crowley was called away from the house by the Golden Dawn. A schism had broken out in the organization. Crowley had summoned demons, and he left the door there at Beluskin open wide when he left. Many believe this is why Crowley's life took such a deep dive into evil in the years that followed. Some believe the impact of Crowley's unfinished ritual would actually impact the wider world with a vengeance. It was on his honeymoon that Crowley finally contacted what he called his holy guardian angel, a mysterious being who said its name was Aiwass. Over 3 straight days, the entity dictated to Crowley what he called the Book of the Law. The book would be the basis for Crowley's Thelema religion, and it included a motto that would underlie countless Luciferian religions and organizations to come. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Crowley later relocated to the east coast of the United States. One favorite retreat was Sopus Island, located in the Hudson River. Here, Crowley reportedly camped for 40 days and 40 nights, aping Jesus' last days and engaging in all manner of rituals and incantations. But it was in his own apartment in New York City that the aspiring magus performed one of his biggest magic tricks when he reportedly summoned a strange, diminutive figure which he called Lam. Crowley was so enthralled by this character that in one of his many altered states, he drew up a sketch of the being, a sketch which would later appear on the cover of Crowley's commentary of The Voice of the Silence, a book written earlier by Madame Blavatsky, the founder of the New Age. The sketch, drawn many decades before the modern UFO era, looks astonishingly similar to the entity of UFO lore known as a gray alien. Aleister Crowley's Lam has that same bulbous, inverted, teardrop-shaped head, large eyes, diminutive holes for a nose, and a slit for a mouth. Crowley did not refer to the entity as an extraterrestrial, since such terms were not in vogue at the time. He called Lam a preternatural intelligence. Interestingly, since many current UFO researchers and even some government officials have taken to using the term non-human intelligence in referring to the beings encountered in UFO or UAP experiences. Famously, Crowley said of the many entities he encountered in his supernatural travels, quote, "Today they call them angels and demons. Tomorrow, they'll call them something else." Call them demons, interdimensional beings, Crowley's preferred preternatural intelligences, or whatever you wish to call them. But Crowley, in his later life, was dedicated to making contact with them. And so, too, was his most apt American pupil. If you recognize the name Jack Parsons, you likely have some familiarity with the aeronautic wizardry of JPL, which Parsons was instrumental in founding. Indeed, although the official interpretation of JPL is Jet Propulsion Laboratory, some have suggested that it really should be Jack Parsons Laboratory, since he played such a pivotal role in shaping it into what it would ultimately become. Born on October 2nd, 1914, Marvel Whiteside Parsons, led a privileged life prior to his public service. He was a bit of a whiz kid growing up, dabbling in science experiments from a very young age. Parsons' professional career can be traced back to the 1930s when he was hired on as a chemical engineer for the Guggenheim Aeronautical Laboratory under the umbrella of the California Institute of Technology, or Caltech. It was after he became associated with Caltech that the U.S. Army became interested in his unique skill set for use in the development of what was then termed jet-assisted aircraft, rockets. Parsons, though a noted eccentric, was viewed as a valuable contributor to the field. He certainly wasn't the only scientist known for unusual behavior. Fellow Caltech alum Theodore von Karman, for example, claimed he had an ancestor who had successfully created a golem, a mythical animated creature from Jewish folklore. Robert Oppenheimer was another eccentric genius and colleague. He was known for his fascination with Eastern religion, and he quoted lines from the Bhagavad Gita when the first atomic bombs were being tested. The eccentricities of Parsons, then, were initially humored about as well as anyone else's in the field. It's all taken as a big lark by most, but JPL was founded on Halloween night, 1936, one of the many occult circumstances that surrounded its inception and operation. Unlike the founding date, other facts can't be so easily dismissed. It was in 1938, just a couple of years into the lab's existence, that Parsons began attending gatherings of Aleister Crowley's Ordo Templi Orientis in Los Angeles. Parsons quickly distinguished himself as a keen protege, and some believed Parsons might eventually even succeed Crowley himself. Among his esoteric peers, Parsons was a bit of a star. His good looks and rogue swagger led some to call him the James Dean of the occult. Even Crowley had to admit an admiration for his student, though he worried about the young man's reckless nature. Parsons had set up what served as an OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, satellite headquarters in a large house in Pasadena. Anyone could move into this sort of Luciferian boarding house, provided they didn't believe in God. It was here that all manner of strange goings-on and wild parties would be reported. On occasion, alarmed neighbors called police, but the charming Parsons, with a smile and a wave of his credentials, was typically able to brush off any inquiries. It was while operating this depraved hostel that Parsons met an aspiring writer and fellow occultist named L. Ron Hubbard, future founder of the Church of Scientology. Later, some would claim that Hubbard, who was a naval officer himself, was actually acting on the part of the U.S. Navy, who'd sent him, allegedly, to spy on the group. Whatever the case may have been, Hubbard decided to join in with what was happening at Parsons' unholy B&B. Hubbard and Parsons became close friends. After some minor occult misadventures, they decided to embark upon some major conjuring. First, however, Parsons insisted that he needed a kind of mystical muse he referred to as an elemental. Specifically, he sought out a, quote, female magical partner with red hair and green eyes. The pair reportedly attempted to summon this woman by conducting sex magic rituals in the Nevada desert. Parsons would masturbate while Hubbard recited incantations designed to manifest Parsons' ethereal bride. Legend has it these sessions were held in the vicinity of the later Area 51. Parsons would write that the pair had returned to Pasadena to find a woman at the door, a woman named Marjorie Cameron. It was then that this unholy trinity of Cameron, Parsons, and Hubbard began to engage in supposed sex magic through a ritual Crowley called the Babylon working. The ritual's aim was to manifest a collection of interdimensional entities including the very whore of Babylon. Part of the process supposedly involved the so-called Enochian calls that had been used by the mystic and seer of the Middle Ages, John Dee. The Enochian calls were allegedly devised by Dee when in a state of intense meditation. The Babylon working was aimed at opening up an interdimensional portal so that these entities could not only communicate from the other side, but actually traverse into our own reality themselves. Crowley didn't approve of these activities and actually warned of the danger of engaging in them. Prior to Parsons banging on the interdimensional gates, Crowley himself had supposedly opened his own small rift in time and space by his summoning of Lam. While he'd had a jolly good time with Lam, he'd learned from both that experience and from the mess he'd made at Beluskin to responsibly close the door when he was done with it. It was the irresponsibility of Jack Parsons, then, that an older and wiser Crowley apparently feared. But Parsons didn't listen.